universe apart. Cal jolted awake. The silence was shocking after the clamor of the dream. He felt a terrible regret. Guilt washed over him. Though the summer night was warm, his body was clammy, and he trembled. He looked at his hand, hoping that what? He sat up in bed, rubbing his forehead. The dream fell back into the invisible river of night and was gone. A murmur sounded from the other room, and he thought Tina. The Marvin the Martian clock she had given him on his birthday last August displayed the time, 3:10 a.m. Cal threw back the covers, made his way to the door by the yellow glare of street lamps, the bulbs ringing, the sign on Patel's grocery, the Amico billboard on the corner. After 3 years, the ambient light of New York nights still impressed him. So different from Hurley, where all illumination, even the mercury vapors along Main Street, was damped by midnight, and the only glow came from the cold, indifferent stars. Barefoot, he padded across the hall to Tina's room, not so much concerned that his sister might be locked in a dream as disturbing as his. The nightmares about their mother, the endless replays of the loss of her, had long since eased back, but to mainly assure himself of the reality of this moment, this place, to jettison the last vestige of dream and accusation. He slid open Tina's door, stood watching her. Asleep, curled on her side, her dark hair an anonymous tangle on the pillow, she looked fragile, younger than 12, and troubled even in repose. Her textbooks, so many, lay stacked and open about the bed, mingled with myriad dog-eared copies of Dance Magazine and programs from the Met, Kennedy Center, Lincoln Center, their covers ablaze with pas de deux and arabesque. The posters and clipped pictures taped to her walls gazed down, guardian angels, Anna Pavlova, Fontaine, Makarova, Buffy. On the nightstand, he could discern the famed snapshot Luz Herrera had taken of her at the March recital, the one he'd missed thanks to the damn aversion deposition. In toe shoes and tights, Tina hung weightless in mid-leap, enraptured. Beside it lay open a volume of Nijinsky's diaries. Nijinsky had slid hopelessly into madness. Tina had explained intently to Cal the other day as he gulped granola and coffee, and no one could save him. But he had been glorious in his moment. Under Cal's bare toes, the shag carpet was worn to the weave. New York wasn't the place to live if you didn't have major money. It was a miracle they scored this barely affordable sublet as it was. But Hurley, Minnesota, wouldn't have provided them with even minor money. Not the kind of money that a good college demands, or private schooling, or the array of courses in technique and variations, character and point that Tina had been inhaling whole at the School of American Ballet. The kind of money that will buy chances for the future. And he'd had to make a choice. We're doing all right here. Even if midnight in Manhattan meant the time he usually bid the night shift paralegals adieu after pulling his 15 hours of research, memoranda, and every other jury chore that might fall a third-year associate drub. Even if, more often than not, Tina was asleep when he arrived home, and he'd hear of her life secondhand from nannies and hired companions and neighbors charmed and wheedled into keeping an eye on her. They would sing her praises, in awe of some new movement she had mastered, some miracle of expressiveness. Or they'd cluck in disapproval at how she pushed herself endlessly for greater perfection, as though she were pursued. Her teachers at the SAB had spoken of her promise, that college might not be the path for her, but rather a future with one of the preeminent companies, perhaps their own New York City ballet. Time would tell, and chance. But there were occasions when she seemed to glow with discipline and joy, glorious in her moment. But lately, He had learned from her watchers that she had withdrawn, vanishing into herself, into her drive to forge something pure and keen. It worried him, left him with a pang of culpability, and yet they had put that gray town with its gray people behind them, its derelict factory and sky that stretched forever and went nowhere. To have remained there and seen the light in her eyes die, have her old at 25 working at the poultry plant. No, whatever it cost him, no matter how he might have to compress himself to a tight core or sheathe himself in steel because of stern leading and Bowen. You did what you were bid and never, ever said no. He would keep the machine going. Tina gave a soft moan of protest, turned in her sleep. Stilling his thoughts, Cal backed out, eased the door shut. Turning, he caught a flash of his tense face in the large practice mirror in the living room, saw the unsettling resemblance to the father who had abandoned them so long ago. In the night-washed hallway, he looked 40 rather than 27, and felt it. He returned to bed, willed himself to drowsiness. The paperwork on Shank's suit had to be filed by noon. He put the dream of the sword away from him, as he'd put aside other dreams in the past. What would he do with a weapon? His palm remembered the smooth, worn leather that fit so perfectly, the way he remembered the smell of rain sweeping across the Minnesota prairies, the summer nights on the front porch, listening through the open window to their mother's voice. All melody, lulling Tina to sleep. Just before he fell into sleep, he thought, it wasn't a weapon. It was his soul. As he slipped over the edge into dreams again, he understood whose. Part 1. Last and First Day. Chapter 1. Near Ground Zero. Before Dawn. Randy Waller had heard all the stories about Medicine Water Creek. It was a load of bullshit, as far as he was concerned. Dreamed up by some drunk sad sack Sioux to make up for the fact that they'd got their asses kicked by the U.S. cavalry and hadn't done a damn thing since. He drew rein at the top of the draw and lit up, scanning the fence line in the glimmer of the first light. Fucking miles to cover today, and they were saying it'd rain tonight. That meant Black Hat Coulee would flood by tomorrow, and he'd have to dick around with wire and fence posts and nails while standing knee-deep in muddy water. Oh, joy. Better to get up early and get the whole thing done today and talk the foreman into letting him take the truck into town tonight. Under him, his horse snorted, rubbed a cheek on the fence post. Randy nudged the animal forward along the fence, down into the long dip of bottomlands, where the clay-colored stream appeared and disappeared amongst the twisted hummocks of rock. The city kids who came up here in vans with their long hair and their $200 hiking boots to find communion with the earth, which, by all Randy could see, meant smoking pot and humping in the bushes, talked about old Indian legends and ate up stories about how horses would spook here in broad daylight and even the coyotes would avoid the place at night. Of course, they didn't come here at night. Randy blew a double line of smoke from his nostrils and scouted the matte blue shadows among the rocks, the waving thickness of grass that grew everywhere on the level ground. They were all over the ranch house, raiding the garbage. And as for Medicine Water, which Randy's dad had called Piss Creek, it was low this time of year in midsummer, a glistening thread among the dark convolutions of eroded rock, coarse echoed by the pale bands that marked the water-chewed banks, mounds and turrets of gray-black lava lifted like sleeping buffalo from the deep grass. This time in the morning, before the prairie wind started up, the place was deadly silent, filled with the hard cold of the night. That'd wear off goddamn soon, Randy stubbed the butt on his boot heel, flicked it away into the creek. "Let's go, Bean," he said, and he twitched the reins. Whole place get hot as the inside of a cow by... Movement caught his eye. The horse flung up its head,